patiently waiting. I never know if it started already or if it's, okay, there we go.
It started. It's showing. It's live.
Yeah, but which system do you trust? I don't know. So the YouTube page has come up. I'm going to assume we're live. I'm going to say, hey, friends. Now we'll get started. Hey, thanks for joining another episode of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross-Project Council meeting. Today is the 24th of the month of May. And yeah, thanks everybody for joining. And if you watch the live stream, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or what have you. Let's get things rolling. Do we have any announcements?
We always do. So, my countdown timer tells me we're like T-minus 12 days-ish to OpenJS World in Austin. The board meeting that is usually on the last Friday of the month is not happening because we're going to have that in person on the 6th, on Monday, June the 6th. So those of you who may have been looking forward to watching the public session on Friday, we're moving that meeting to the 6th. So that's an FYI. We still have lots of space, I think, for our community projects. If there's any OpenJS project or adjacent to the foundation project who wants a space to do, a quick lightning talk about the project or an update or a demo or something like that, please reach out to us or the programming committee so we can get you on the schedule for the theater space, because we're going to be publishing that to the final agenda soon. So there's that. So really excited to see everybody. Understand the Node Collab Summit is coming together quite nicely. Please reach out to Waleed if you have any questions about the Node Collab Summit on the 9th and 10th. That is, I think, that's the OpenJS World is the air we breathe right now. So yeah.
Yeah, and you referred to it as the Node Collab Summit, which I get historically. There are a bunch of things happening this year, right?
That's true. That's a Freudian. Yes, it's yes. There's the Collab Summit space, but Waleed has been leading that, and we're leading particularly some of the organization for the Node.js project too. So please reach out to him if you have questions about the summit.
Yeah, and I think just a reminder, we will be sharing space with the CD Foundation, that's Continuous Delivery, and the GraphQL Foundation. So if you do have a pass, you are welcome to hit any of those sessions that makes your heart sing. It's open. One ticket covers all 3 events.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Any other announcement related stuff or anything from the board? No? Cool. Just checking.
I guess that does, Joe, that on the topic of the board meeting, we've been talking a little bit about just like making sure that there's good conversation flowing between the board and the projects. If there's anything you'd like to share with the board, project news, something to celebrate, someone you want to recognize, whatever, I'm sure that would be most welcome in our CPC updates to the board.
Great. Yeah, and I'm rallying a group of CPC folks to crash the board party so we can come blasting in.
I think it'd be the other way around, actually.
All right,
yeah.
cool.
And just another update, I did attend KubeCon last week, which was interesting, and lots of open source community folks there, business folks. Nice to see that sort of European crowd. So we are exploring how we can have a presence in Europe in the fall. I don't know if that's on the agenda quite yet, if it was tagged there on the summit, but yeah. Cool. So that was really good. And I might be roping in some of you all on some follow-up conversations for people interested in membership at OpenJS.
Great. Fun.
Mhm.
Cool. I don't know if it was before or after, but the jest announcement that happened within the last 2 weeks. That's something we should share, maybe.
Maybe since we had a CPC meeting, since it was a working session, or did it happen that day? I'm losing track of time, but yeah, super exciting announcement with Meta transferring the Jest project to OpenJS. It really has been a community project. So that was just great to see, and really excited about our new community folks joining.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Mhm.
Definitely be
Cool.
good,
Yeah, agreed.
especially having them along with Mocha. We have really good coverage in the foundation for test projects, which is great.
Yep.
Cool. All right. With all that, we can get into some things here. Looks like our agenda's, somewhat light. I don't know, Jory, when you put this agenda together, did you happen to check any of the other repos? I know there have been a couple of things lately.
I didn't, I'll be honest, I copied because our agenda has been relatively, the agenda items have been relatively consistent meeting over meeting. So I didn't go check and I know there's not anything on the standards working group repo. So for this call today, I didn't check the other ones.
I can paste in at the end. I've just run the automation so we can just cross-check. I closed it as a duplicate issue, the one it would have generated for next time. But anyway, we can cross-check against that just to see.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And I swear one of these days I'll get the PKG meet tooling up and running. Keep trying, false starts. So the first item on the agenda, while Michael looks to double check, we'll just get rolling.
Looks like we had everything, so.
Okay, good, great. And thank you, Jory. The first item is issue 874. This is CPC board seat term limits. We talked about this a little bit, but I don't know if we landed anywhere or what our
I thought we decided last time that it was basically, it wasn't, my recollection is we were just going to close this because we didn't necessarily think we needed to do it at this point. Because the issue was more around like planning to get good candidates and making sure we had a good pipeline and nurturing the pipeline versus the limits. And I think in the end, it was like, we could probably just not do this and focus on the other stuff.
yeah, that's how I remember it as well.
Yeah, let's just close it.
Okay. Trying to see if this comment covers that. Yeah, okay. All right, great. I will move along then. The next item is already closed, issue 859. This is the one that bore out that last issue in terms of the CPC board seat election and call for nominations. So nothing there. The next one is this pull request 851, update contributor covenant code of conduct to version 2.1. Oh, my browser froze on me. I know we talked about this. It looks like there's been some commentary since our last session here. I don't know if you're fresh, Jory, or
Yep.
Jordan. Yeah.
I can jump in on this one. So on last Tuesday, we had a CPC working meeting with some folks, and I will pop those notes there into the Zoom chat if anybody wants to review that. We talked extensively about 851 and 852 and sort of kind of dissecting the problem. There was agreement in the working session call that for the time being, we should scope the document, the contributor covenant document one-to-one with the projects. So the idea being like, there's this language this is project community, which we had some debate about, what is the scope? What does that mean? For the time being, until we can get all of the many parties aligned on what it would look like to be able to share information about bans across projects or across the foundation, that we basically look at the contributor covenant as, one document, one project. So Electron has its, copy, and Node has its copy, and so on and so forth. But it happens, of course, that we have all adopted the same copy because that is how we can more effectively adjudicate issues if there is some need for escalation or some need for pulling in expertise from across the foundation. I realize that's not the state we want to live in. We want to live in a state where it's a bit more able to discuss, perhaps, like, and defensively like say, okay, an action in project A is also going to warrant an action in project B because it was particularly egregious or problematic or what have you. But we just don't have that system right now. And I'm afraid for us to gate this is me speaking personally now, to gate change based on that bigger conversation, which I think will take some time. Like I'd love to see the projects be able to make this incremental change for now. So there's one thread, which is, just sort of like the nature of the language and the change. And then a separate thread, which Tierney and Emily have pointed out on 851, which is sort of how we sort of keep track of our changes as they diff from the upstream contributor covenant. Tierney and Emily would like to see us do like a patch type process. I think that's totally fine, and have no strong feelings about that. That makes sense to me. So that's sort of the summary of the state of 851. I know Jordan had additional comments that were different. Jordan, I'll pause and let you sort of
Sure.
intro your point.
Well, so I hear that there are folks who have a concern that they would be forced to ban someone from their project that they didn't choose to ban. That's a valid concern. We've discussed many times that's not something we would ever impose or require. And there's lots of ways or lots of wording elsewhere that would prohibit us from interfering in individual projects in that way. The concern I have is that a code of conduct says what we may do, not what we must do, what we may do. We're not forced to ban somebody every time there's a problem, but the code of conduct allows us to do so. And it is that allowance that is important. This is giving us rights and powers. This is not requiring us to use it to do anything. And as such, by adding the qualifier project, we are removing our ability to do anything beyond one single project, which means if I, the NVM maintainer, want to ban everybody who's banned in any other OpenJS Foundation project, because I have the belief, perhaps informed by a decade of experience, that someone who's an asshole somewhere is an asshole everywhere, then I am no longer allowed to do that if this lands. So this is like landing with the word project is actually limiting my ability to maintain my own project, because it is no longer allowing me to ban somebody for behavior elsewhere in the community, in the foundation community. I want to retain that capability.
Toby.
Yeah, no, I'm just, I understand that, like, you've mentioned that reading, Jordan, multiple times, and I have no idea whether that reading is actually correct or not. And I'd be curious if anyone has a sense of like how the contributor covenant acts from that perspective, like if it actually is your reading correct or not, essentially.
Well, just to be clear, it's not a legal document, right? So there's it could be read in either way, but I don't believe that anyone could really defend that it requires us to ban someone across multiple projects. I don't think that's a reasonable interpretation. And therefore, however, somebody, probably the person being banned, could read it with the word project as to say that they're free to act badly in one project and not be banned from any others. And even though we don't necessarily have to care about that person's opinion, we could hear their complaint and say, sorry, we banned you anyway, or I banned you anyway from my project, as it were. I would prefer not to invite that kind of rebuttal.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the reason, so we talked about this last week in the working session. One thing, Jordan, that I think makes what you're talking about complicated, and maybe the answer is we need to discuss this and discuss this legally, is Jory brought up the concept of, so if I've Node and I ban someone from Node for being for being an asshole. There are legal implications about me sharing that activity with you on NVM. And so I think
that, sorry, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
No, that's it. I think that was the context which is why, yeah, we went in that direction.
And that is totally fair.
Yeah.
And the ability to sort of weaken confidentiality and share that information is totally unrelated to this discussion. And that's something we would have to discuss. And given that I have like privileged access to confidential things, I would have to manage it for myself, as I already do, and make sure that my knowledge here doesn't spill over into knowledge I shouldn't have over here. However, if I see somebody refer to that ban publicly, that's no longer confidential. I can act on that behavior or on that comment. And that information. And so that's the sort of thing I'm talking about, which is these sorts of consequences occasionally become public. And at that point, I would like the freedom to act on them as if I had no privileged access to that information. And with the word project in there, I fear that I wouldn't.
So I think, both you and Toby have kind of, said this, which is that this code of conduct or the contributor covenant, it's not a legal document. It's basically, a policy that we plan to apply to our community spaces. And I think Coraline's intent was for projects to be able to take this document and as needed sort of patch it, fix it, apply it pragmatically in ways that befit projects, right? That's their goal, not to be really totally prescriptive, but rather, here's the framework and all of that. So I don't believe, and I understand like you're reading from a very strictly literal sense may make you feel like it limits your ability to take action against someone who is disruptive in your space. But I, again, taking into consideration, this isn't a legal document. You are still, as a maintainer, free to apply it as pragmatically as you need. I don't think that qualifier reduces your ability to act. And certainly, I think you've got plenty of arguments you can make if somebody wanted to try and challenge that point of view. And hopefully, the other nice thing that we have right now, and Jory better knock on a bunch of wood right now, we're not having any issues in our communities that are raising this. I suspect that I hope that by the time we do, because it does feel like a when, not an if, eventually we'll need this. We will have the cross-project information sharing flow more figured out.
That's a good clarification. You're right that I can act as I like within my own project, within the bounds of my confidentiality agreements elsewhere, regardless of whether this term is in the document or not. The concern I have is retaliation. The other main purpose of the code of conduct documents in general, can't speak for ADA specifically, but I assume, is to give enforcers or moderators a document to point at and say, this is why I'm doing it. And then that deflects a lot of the rage and retaliation for the violator towards the document, which is a lot harder thing to argue with, and something that can't be burned out. So you're right. This is sort of a theoretical situation where I wouldn't be technically barred from doing what I want to do, and I could still do it. But it's this, the chain of logic here is that I would get more retaliation than I want with this term there. So it's not as perhaps urgent as I may be making it sound, but I still think it's important.
I would hope and expect that an escalation process would sort of, help neutralize that. The word project or even community, I always think of everybody as communities. You live in multiple communities. OpenJS is not one community, it's multiple communities. So yeah, and I do think sort of the sharing will be sort of a long-term process on more egregious cases, using the escalation process that we put in place. So, Toby.
And just a tiny point on the information sharing bit. All of this falls under the same legal entity. So for most jurisdictions, I don't see how sharing information from project to project would actually be problematic in any way from that purpose.
I don't know how that works with open source projects. If you join project X, is there any sense that, things within that project won't be shared with arbitrary project Y?
So this is where, I think I got to attend a session during our Linux Foundation All Hands with the legal team, and they were saying, this is one of the spaces within all of LF projects that are kind of chewing up and requiring the most legal resources these days, because really this is a space of the law, field of the law, where we just nothing has been tested. We don't exactly, first off, there's lots of people who threaten lawsuits. Nobody brings them. It's unclear under what grounds a lawsuit would be brought, and so on and so forth. But because of that ambiguity and because of that uncertainty, and here I'm just going to speak to the United States because that's where I'm based and that's what I know. But because of that, it's probably causing us as open source maintainers and leaders to be more cautious, because we don't, necessarily know how something would play out if, in fact, that jerk did bring a suit because they were banned from a project. And again, the threat of it seems to loom much larger than anything has happened in actual practice. So I think one thing we could do, in addition to what we've talked about for a while, which is let's find some great moderation and conflict, mediation trainings and stuff for project communities to take advantage of. We could maybe also ask at some point for one of our awesome legal counsel members to just do a quick sort of what do you really need to be concerned about if you're serving in this role, if you're taking a decision to make an action, and that might help kind of highlight and relieve pressure. Toby?
Yeah, I'm also assuming folks would have legal insurance through their employer to some degree if something like this did happen. So, if this is something that you're really concerned about, maybe you should actually ask your employer. Being self-employed, I have legal insurance for those issues through my own company. So, I assume that you're probably protected that way too.
I'm not sure that that's a fair assumption for people who volunteer as an aside, right? If you're paid and it's a core part of your job, I think that I still wouldn't be sure, but I'd be like, yeah, maybe. But like for people who are like, I'm doing this on my own time, I don't think that they would, I wouldn't advise considering that that protection would be there anyway.
Yeah, they can't ask their job if they're not doing work for their job.
Oh, absolutely.
And they won't have
We have
legal
lots of
insurance if they're
people
employed.
in that case, right? So
This was a topic at a Linux Foundation member summit. People were wondering the same thing. I think what we heard is what Jory said, there's a lot of threats of litigation, but there hasn't actually been, we haven't seen much. And the Linux Foundation and OpenJS has legal resources that we, have been brought in early, and it really sort of mitigated a lot of things. Someone did say from GitHub that, suggested perhaps we have, if it ever were to become a problem, we could have like a legal defense fund, for example, in the open source industry. But right now it's hasn't seemed to hasn't really played out that way.
yeah, I mean, back to the original point that Jordan had, and maybe this is like a follow-on, because I know we don't want to block things, but like, if we talked about amendments, something that says, if, despite having adopted the common code of conduct, nothing prevents a project from including, behavior outside of their own project in their determination. That seems to me like it wouldn't be terribly, that wouldn't be controversial. Like that's much different than a central group is going to tell projects what you're going to do. That's just clarifying that this is not intended to limit their scope in terms of what the factors that they want to include, right?
Yeah, and I think we want our communities to be safe spaces. So, I think that I would see that as a modification, as the contributor covenant gave direction. If you need to modify it to suit your particular organization, you're welcome to do so and document that. So.
Yeah, and it might not even be a modification. It just might be a clarification of our interpretation to prevent the case that Jordan was talking about, where somebody says, well, no, this limits your scope, right? It's like, well, no, we're not saying that it limits the scope. It's just saying this is the scope that the project has agreed to. And this is the scope we asked the projects to agree to, but they're free to, to consider other sources of information if they want to.
I'm trying to think through how we move forward on this.
I know, I was thinking, what's next step? Same.
I mean, if I'm the only one who would prefer who's leaning towards blocking the PR on it, then we don't have to block the PR on it. But it seems like an important default messaging. And I think it is a better default messaging that there is no explicit limit to the consequences of shitty behavior, even if there is no requirement that punishment be expansive. So I would still like to see that term, that qualifier, removed, even if this PR lands with it. Like, in other words, I think that in terms of the opposite dangers, right? Like the danger of people acting badly is far worse than the danger of the foundation overstepping and trying to push a project to ban someone who's not a good person anyway. I just don't see that scenario playing out at all. So I don't think that's a concern we should worry about.
Toby?
Yeah, just to be clear, the PRR is not like that word is actually in the COC right now. The PR is removing it, and we're arguing against not removing it. So we're saying that, yes, we can have conversations about this in the future, but this shouldn't be, we don't want to include that change with other ones because the other ones are not contentious. That one potentially is. And so we're saying, let's not change that thing now because it is contentious. And I understand your point of saying, actually, this is problematic. But my reply to that would be, well, in that case, let's have a different conversation about this. And it's made weird by the fact that there are two different versions of 2.0, which is what's creating this whole sort of like weird conversation that's been ongoing.
Agreed. Sarah?
Yeah, I think that separating it out as a separate conversation is a good idea personally, and it seems like I'm maybe on the minority on this, but I think limiting the here's what I've observed is an inequality in resources across projects. Some projects like Node have a really thoughtful and well thought out process, as well as I believe have thought through the representation process too on how to respond to COC issues. I know we have lots of other projects that have less resources and haven't had the opportunity to think through what a diverse COC board would look like. And I could really, I think it would be really hard for the foundation should we run into someone that was egregiously violating the COC to have them in some of our projects. So I think it is worth a longer conversation about moving the word.
Yeah, so I think if we kind of align that with Toby's comment, we should try to land this PR with minimal changes to, or no changes to the 2.1 version, and then perhaps continue the conversation. And I think there are a couple other conversations we should have as well around this in terms of moderation and whatnot. So we could spin that off into a different issue or pull request. Okay.
Yeah, that definitely sounds right. And then there may be one way is like removing the word, but there might be other ways of like adding our clarification to how it applies or whatever. But it seems like definitely, as Toby says, like especially it's kind of like let's land without modifications and then propose a modification, right? Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think even how we modify it is also up
Right.
for debate too, or at least conversation. Okay. If somebody wouldn't mind dropping that sort of little summary in there, I don't know who could help us move it forward, making sure that we are consistent with 2.1 and go from there would be great.
And I think we're all good, just kind of back to like the how of the change. We're all good with sort of like maintaining patch files and doing it that way.
Great.
Okay. Groovy.
Right on. Next up is issue 826. This is a focus on JavaScript security at OpenJS. I sent in an application for a collab space. And Jory.
And I'm supposed to do the next thing, which I had to go figure out what the next thing I was supposed to do is. Because Brian did this before, and now Brian is gone.
Yeah.
So I believe that the next step is for me to send this around to the CPC as a call for approval to spin this up, and we will get to practice this again.
We can blame it on the new person too, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very
blame
much
it on
like
the
a
old
project.
person. Yeah.
Oh, good.
We're going to have a slide on it at OpenJS World, just saying. Let's get it done.
Excellent.
Cool.
Cool. So not much to talk about on this one yet. We'll keep it moving forward. Next up is license check, support and tooling. I don't see anything recent here. It looked like maybe somebody was typing, or maybe they're just getting ready to type something. I don't know if there's any news here.
Oh, good.
I don't know if you have an update from my update. No, we're next on the feature list, and just having some delays from some Linux Foundation staffing concerns. As you know, Shubra was leading that, and unfortunately, yeah.
Okay.
I will also report that we're down to just 3 projects remaining on the old OpenJS Foundation CLA infrastructure. So we should be, we're almost totally wrapped up with that, which was quite the feat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Good news. Last one on the agenda here then is clarify requirements around COC violation. I don't know if we really have any news on this puppy either. It's like
I have to train the puppy. I look.
yeah. No big deal. Got lots of stuff to do, so that's good. So cool. Well, we'll keep this one open, and as we progress through this COC and moderation stuff, we'll get to these.
Since we did kind of tackle some COC related things today and on the working session, which has been really fruitful, there are 2 additional PRs, one which is quite old. It's a great grandparent PR on the OpenJS Foundation CPC repo. It's 749, I believe, and this is around process changes. About a year ago, there were some comments on updates. We just revisited it briefly in the working session to confirm that that is still the way we want to go, and so we'll address the comments that were left by, I think, Mateo and Michael, to address the necessary changes there, and I hope we can land that soon. So if y'all, assuming you see the changes come in and you're +1, if you want to thumbs it up and all that sort of stuff, that'd be great. The second PR.
May I just have a question about this one?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it a lot of a duplicate was the one that we were just discussing before that I'm not making any progress on? Because if that's the case, then maybe I can stop having to deal with that one that I'm not making any progress on.
That is a great question. Let me jump to the other one, the other PR,
Sure.
and then let's jump back to that question. So the other PR is one that Christian opened on Tuesday of last week, just clarifying the process through which we consider a change to the COC document. There's a minor request for a change from Emily, but I'm sure we can take that and amend and move forward. So please take a look at that. It just sort of paves the cow path, so to speak. Which is a weird phrase. Do I owe $1 to you, Toby, for that weird?
You do.
Okay, that's what I figured. Okay,
I'm
so
happy
now,
you haven't forgotten about this.
No, I've got a large
practice of ours.
jar of like Americanisms that idioms that I owe Toby for. Okay, so going back to Toby's question, whether 786 and 749 are duplicative. The purpose behind 749 was to remove some redundancy we had and make it a bit more streamlined for a reporter what would happen, and how the response team would be able to proceed. This came from a challenge that we had when there was a issue that was escalated by a project to the CPC response squad, if you will. And we had a fairly large group of people who are interested in serving on that community or that committee. It was very hard to coordinate across time zones, all of those people. It was kind of hectic. So we decided, that was not ideal. That wasn't great. Let's revise. The revised process makes it clear that there's basically one group of people who will respond to a report. And the way that we will tackle it is more small group first, expanding to the whole committee if necessary, because the committee does not agree with the smaller group's decision, or the reporter is unsatisfied with the outcome of the smaller group decision. So it was more of a way to address agility and coordination. So that's the scope of that PR.
So thank you for clarifying. And unfortunately, it is not the same scope as the one that I'm working on. And so I will have to do the work. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sorry. Cool.
For some reason, I was under the impression that I had looked a while back and that it was there was a lot more overlap, but it really looks like there's very little, if any.
So that's all of the agenda. The only other thing that is on here is to look at the dates and reminders, which reminds me of dates, including that the CPC chair term ended about a month ago. So I'm going to look up the last issue, which I think I created, and open up a CPC chair issue to get that going.
And I believe just kind of related to terms and roles and stuff, the board seat currently occupied by Michael is up at the end of July or the end of June? End of June? First of July.
The end of July, and it is, there are a few things that are open then. I will grab this link. It is the Director 2 election or term ends July 31st. And additionally, CPC impact voting member selection ends then, term ends then. CPC non-impact voting member term also ends then. And that's it. I guess those three items. And our reason for having them all at the same time was that it was after the event, and we thought we could drum up some excitement and interest from hanging out with people in person.
We should probably give those folks more of a heads up on the timing on the project side.
Yep.
And our little news you can use.
Yeah, we're almost a month out, so
Yeah.
I agree. We should start circulating. Great. That's all I got. Anybody else?
Just the last thing I have is gratitude for each and every one of you and all that you do for our projects. How do you like that? It's genuine though. I don't think I have anything else. Just looking forward to seeing hopefully as many of you as possible in Austin. Live band karaoke. Super psyched about that.
I have extra appreciation this week for Christian and Toby, who dial in from different time zones. Amazing. Double, triple kudos. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I felt terrible arriving quarter of an hour late, but I was having dinner with my kids, and I just decided to actually finish dinner. So that's why. So it's actually, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
No, priority for sure.
Yeah, tell your friends to meet us in Austin. I just booked my flight and hotel, I think yesterday. That was a bad idea. I'm about a mile away, but I can use the exercise.
Well,
Yeah, looking forward to seeing everybody.
Yeah, me too.
Same.
Cool.
all right. Ping us in Slack if y'all need anything.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Bye.